Bill Carroll for Zennie62 Media, bringing back the ever popular Saturday Superlatives series. And I want to start first with just giving a sort of team superlative to Boston College. Boston College, of course, a 20 plus point underdog, which seems crazy to me if you know anything about the Wells Crowther game. So the Red Bandana game happens every year to honor Wells Crowther, who had been a volunteer firefighter and was a traitor for, I believe it was Cantor Fitzgerald, but don't quote me on that part. And on the 11th of September of 2001, he apparently, and once again, they only recognize him based on a red bandana, but that's what his trademark was. He apparently re-entered the building after it had been struck by the plane, went into the tower many times, and carried people, not physically carried, but guided people to safety, going back one last time, and unfortunately was killed the last time he re-entered the building. And so each year they honor him at Boston College, and I would not want to be the opponent during that game. Florida State University, of course, a team that many people have in the top five, went into that game and narrowly escaped. And if not for Boston College making a few mistakes and a lot of penalties, I think 19 accepted penalties, which I don't know if it's an ACC record, but I bet it's close. If not for that, they come out of that game with a win. But despite that, I want to honor them as a team for how they played in honor of their fallen alumni, Wells Crowther, who played lacrosse during his days at Boston College. But I do want to hit upon another ACC player. So Jacob Roberts is one of those players who's going to end up being drafted late, or perhaps even not at all, because he's 5'11" and change, maybe 3/4, about 233 pounds. He could probably carry about 247 pounds, probably without losing anything. But he's a player who's probably going to be best served by being a move around piece on defense. He plays inside linebacker and sometimes kicks outside. But he has 5 sacks in 3 games, including 3 against Old Dominion. And people may sort of snicker, Old Dominion, ha ha. But there's a couple of Old Dominion players off of last year's Old Dominion team playing in the NFL now. That team is better than you think. And Wake Forest is consistently better than people think. So watch out for him and for Wake Forest as a whole. A lot of people sort of left them for dead when Sam Hartman left. That team is far from dead. Watch out for the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. And I also want to hit upon one of my favorite FCS pass rushers. So speaking of sort of teams that people may have forgotten about, so the Albany Great Danes, of course, have a pass rusher who's going to go early in this draft, but he's no longer there. He's now at Florida State. His name's Jared Verse, but he spent the first couple of years of his playing career playing for Albany. And now, like I said, he's, home field is now Doak Walker Stadium. Not Doak Campbell, sorry. Doak Campbell Stadium on the campus of Florida State. But watch out for Anton Juncaj, and I'm taking a stab at the pronunciation of the last name, but he's one of those tweeners, tackle in tweeners, but he's probably about 6'2" and a half, about 272 pounds, but a devastating pass rusher, and has 6 sacks already. He is a guy who's going to average, I don't think 2 sacks a game for the season, but I think he could easily average over a sack a game for this entire season. And I hope, once again, this is where I get to start bothering people, I hope that Mr. Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl has his eyes on Anton Juncaj as well. So this year, as it is every year, there's always a lot of good players that sort of escape people's notice. So I'm going to go back once again to Wake Forest University and talk about a player that I really like who has another year of eligibility. So he's unlikely to come out. But Jasheen Davis, also at Wake Forest University, and he's a true defensive lineman. He has 3 sacks in 3 games. And unlike Jacob Roberts, who's a move-around piece, this is a guy who's a little closer to being a full-sized, whatever term I'm going to use, defensive lineman. He's a player that I think people had some expectations for coming into the season. He's already, I think, started to exceed some of them. There'll be a few questions about him when he comes out in terms of athletic testing time, but he's honestly right around 260 pounds and probably about 6'2" and 3/8. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets over 260, particularly if he comes back next year. And there's a place for him in the NFL. And I could see him being a Darryl Tapp type of pass rusher for many years. I'm going to hit on one last player that I think is sort of, actually 2 last players, 2 more players that I think are underrated, underappreciated defensive pass rushers. And one of them, of course, you just got a chance to see. In fact, he sustained an injury during the recent everyone was watching Colorado game and stayed up until, you know, 1 to, depending on where you live in the country, between 1 and darn near 3 o'clock in the morning. But Muhammad Kamara is probably going to be a stand-up pass rusher at the next level. His story is a fantastic story, which I will not attempt to tell right now today, but I will later do another follow-up video on Muhammad Kamara. I think he's one of those players that you sort of circle now, and like fellow Colorado Ram Jory Porter, I could see him having a long, successful NFL career. Once again, slightly undersized, about 249 pounds, probably about 6 feet and 5/8. So if you're looking for a super long-armed guy who's super bendy, though he bends well enough, he's not that guy, but he's a power guy with speed, and I think he's going to test well. He's sort of what Thomas Incoom was for me last year. I think he might be this year. And I'll give you one last guy. And once again, there's another player that I think people will catch on to later in the draft process. But he's Judge Culpepper. First of all, awesome name, right? He's a definite candidate for the all-name team. And if, once again, another guy that people will wonder about exactly where he plays. And yes, if you're wondering, he is the son of Brad Culpepper. Taller than his dad, who was probably about 6'2". Judge is listed at 6'4", but he's probably a legit 6'3 and a quarter, 6'3 and 3/8. And he's listed at 293, and that looks to be about right. Maybe 288, 287. More like Chris Long than he is like his father in terms of his playing style, but I could see him having a really, really nice career. And then, you know, another fun fact, his mother was on Survivor. So there you go. Tells you something about his athletic ability, toughness, and competitiveness, that his family is what it is. Sister plays basketball at NYU. So I imagine that he's going to do well. He may not test super well. The target number for him is about 493. Anything under 493 at his size, he's making money. So those are some Saturday superlatives, focusing specifically on some underrated defensive line / linebacker types who I think are great pass rushers. I'm going to delve into offensive players very soon, and I'll just talk about some other players that I think are just underrated. And most importantly, I'm going to hit on some HBCU players, because please, people, start drafting more HBCU players. There's a lot of really good players coming out of there, and some of the real standouts you're seeing when you watch Colorado started at Jackson State.